Hi. We're going to look at chapter 31 of the Tao Te Ching in the Regina Akers translation. I named this chapter War. To the principled person, weapons are not admirable. Perhaps they are malevolent. To one who abides in the way, weapons do not have a rightful place. A principled person values the left, peace. Those who use weapons value the right, violence. Weapons are threatening. To the principled person, they are the wrong tools. If you find yourself with no alternative but to use them, remain centered in the highest principles, indifferent to ideas about fame or gain. Victory is not attractive. Those who find victory attractive are happy to kill others. Those who are happy to kill others won't achieve their worldly ambitions. Ultimately, they will fail. Auspiciousness aligns itself with the left, peace. Inauspiciousness aligns itself with the right, violence. The reluctant military commander dwells with the left. The enthusiastic military commander dwells with the right. Speak of war as if you are speaking about a funeral. Under any circumstance, the killing of many is cause for grieving. Defeating others is like hosting a funeral. So we've been on this theme now for a few chapters. And I translated this chapter a little differently than the common translation. And I thought about going into the characters and showing you why I did that. But it actually didn't seem like what was most important here. So I'm not gonna do that. I want to focus on why we go to war. And I'm not talking about our country against another country. I'm talking about, you and me against our family members, our friends, the bank teller, whoever we go to war with. I want to talk about why we go to war and how we can um, look at ourselves first so that we can face things that we need to face without going to war. That's what I want to talk about. So I'm going to bring NTI into it again. I don't really like bringing NTI into it, the Holy Spirit's interpretation of the New Testament, because I realize that what we're looking at here is the Tao. I think I brought NTI into it in chapter 1, and I haven't since then, I don't think. But there's something in NTI that I think really addresses this well. So we're going to look at it. This is in NTI Matthew chapter 18. It's verses 15 to 17. Be careful in talking to your brother regarding a difference or disagreement. For in the world, these discussions must happen. And that's what we've seen. That's what we saw in chapter 30 of the Tao, that sometimes there are things that is our role to face. We know we need to address this directly and head on, but we need to be careful. Be careful in talking to your brother regarding a difference or disagreement. For in the world, these discussions must happen. When you go to your brother, go with me. And me here is being centered in the Tao. That's really synonymous with the me. You get centered with the Tao when you go to speak to your brother about whatever needs to be faced, a difference or a disagreement, or something similar. Check your heart to ensure you find forgiveness there, and also that you find trust that the situation has been given to me. Or another way of saying that, we want to check to make sure that we trust that the Tao has this. It's like we talked about in chapter 30. We don't want to go in attempting to control things and make things our way, pushing and shoving like a bull in a china shop, right? Even with our words, right? Accusing and blaming and whatever else we can do that would be our weapons of war. Instead, we really want to look at ourselves before we go into these situations. And I'm going to tell a story in a little bit about how to do that. We want to look at ourselves before we go into these situations and make sure that we're centered in the Tao, that we're centered in trust, that however this unfolds, this is the way the Tao wants it to go. And I'm okay with it because it is the Tao. So check your heart to ensure you find forgiveness there. And also that you find trust that the situation has been given to me. Clear your mind of judgments and desired outcomes. Clear your mind of judgments and desired outcomes. Ask only for healing and enlightenment. That's all that you really want out of the situation. And if that's all that you want out of the situation, then any way the situation goes in the world, you will be able to trust. When you are sure all of this has been done, talk to your brother while being careful to listen to me in love and confidence, right? Staying centered in that Tao and feeling intuitively for what you are to say. Staying centered in the Tao should be our number one focus in these conversations, right? Our relative or our friend or our coworker says something, we check within before we respond. Staying centered is most important. In this way, there can be no loss, for the situation is no longer a situation of the world, but it is a situation of heaven, for heaven has been made its purpose. I said I was going to tell a story. I'm going to tell a story about me making a mistake very recently. In between making the last Tao video and this Tao video, I've made this mistake. So my mom, my daughter, and a friend and I are going on a cruise along with an entire social club that my mom belongs to, mostly older people. And the social club hired a travel agent to arrange this cruise. It's a Hawaii cruise where you go to several islands in a week. And back in August, we paid for the flights. Actually, we paid a deposit, 50%, but we agreed at that time that we knew that the flights were non-refundable. And at that time, what was happening was everybody was going to be taking a bus from Pueblo to Denver, spending a night in Denver, and then the next day taking direct flights to Hawaii, and then spending a night in a hotel in Hawaii and getting on the ship the next day. And there was a price for this. Well, recently I went to the social club and they passed out the exact flight itinerary, and it was different. Instead of flying out of Denver, we're flying out of Colorado Springs to Las Vegas, where we have a 45-minute connection, and then from Las Vegas to Hawaii. And on the way back, we're flying from Hawaii to all the way over to Dallas, and then another 45-minute connection and back to Colorado Springs. And I really thought that those flights were not as good as the ones that we thought we were buying. I also became curious, maybe intuitively curious. There was a feeling that I had because I had nothing to base this on. So there was this feeling that I had where in the Denver plans, we were going to be taking a bus to Denver, spending the night in Denver, and then going to the airport the next morning. There was this feeling that we weren't going to get a hotel in Colorado Springs, that we would be going directly from Pueblo to Colorado Springs and getting on the plane. And so there was all this change. There's one less night hotel. There's no longer a direct flight. We're flying different airline, different way. There was all this change, and there was no change in the price. So I didn't understand. And I went to talk to this lady. before talking to her, I wanted to double check and make sure that I was remembering everything right. So I went on the website, and when I went to search for her website, I happened to notice that her travel agency had a 3.2 rating, 3.2 rating. Happened to see that. And then I went and I looked, and I had all the facts correct. I wasn't mistaken. So I went up and I talked to her and I told her that I wanted to know why this change had happened. And she told me that the social club had requested that she lower the price. And I said, but the price didn't change. The price is the same. And she said, that's because we're flying on one airline there and one airline back, which means she had to buy one-way tickets. And those are more expensive than the round trip tickets we would have had out of Denver. I got really confused at this point. If the social club asked her to um, change things to make it cheaper, and instead it was more expensive, I was very confused. And I said, well, are we going to have a hotel in Colorado Springs? We were having a hotel in Denver. We're going to have a hotel in Colorado Springs. Said, no, she couldn't do that because these flights were more expensive. And the conversation just went round and round after that. But where my confusion was is how come we're getting less for our money? And the reason she made the changes was because they asked her to lower the cost, but the cost didn't change. Instead, we're paying the same amount and we're not getting direct flights. We're not getting a hotel the night before. We're going to have to, our flight's at 6 a.m. So we're going to have to get up super early and go there or pay for our own hotel. I mean, all this stuff just kind of started bubbling up. And I wasn't the only one, by the way, that wasn't happy with this change. And one lady standing next to me said, something like, you should talk to her boss. I said, I am going to talk to her boss. And the travel agent said, I am the boss. And this is when I pulled out my weapon. I said, now I understand why your agency has a 3.2 rating. And as soon as I said it, I knew I'd pulled out my weapon. I was favoring the right. The right hand holds the weapon, right? I was stabbing her, and I'm sure she felt stabbed. It was afterwards that I looked at this. It was afterwards that I looked at why I went to war. And what I found was that I had invited my daughter and my friend to go with my mom and me on this cruise. And as a result of being the one who did the inviting, I felt responsible for their happiness. I felt responsible for them to be happy with the trip, happy with the price they paid, happy with everything. And obviously, I thought that they weren't going to be happy because of the way the travel agent was handling this. So I had to look very deeply. In fact, I started looking at other circumstances, and I could find other recent circumstances within the last month where I had been at least uncomfortable in situations, or at least having thoughts about controlling, even though I did not follow those thoughts because I could see the control in it, having thoughts about controlling because I wanted people to be happy. I began to see this recurring theme of wanting people to be happy. And I spent some introspection time accepting that I need to allow people to choose for themselves whether they will be happy or not. And if I am uncomfortable with their not being happy, then that's just an emotion I need to allow and be with and let it move through me. Rest, accept, and trust. But it's not my job to try and make people happy. That's an error, a mistake in my own mind. After I did this looking, this travel agent had scheduled meetings with everyone that's going on the cruise to answer their individual questions. And the morning of the meetings, she canceled. And so someone from the social club called me. This person was furious. And I could sit here and list several other things this travel agent has done, by the way. So they're all kind of adding up to people. And this lady called me and she was furious about how these meetings were canceled at the last minute. And there's been, the lady didn't say anything about rescheduling them. But what I noticed was it did not inside in any way join in her anger, join in her judgment. I think I might have, I'm pretty sure I would have, prior to looking at this within myself, prior to understanding what the mistake was in my own mind, what the thought was that I was holding on to that was leading me to war. So I listened to her and I understood her point of view, but I didn't join in it anymore. And in fact, since then, I haven't noticed it coming back. Someone else asked me, are you going to talk to the travel agent again? And I honestly don't know. I just don't know because I don't feel anything on the inside. So I suppose that if I do, I do. And if I don't, I don't. And I truly do not know. Um, I don't feel driven anymore. So when we go to war with someone, it is always because of a thought in our own mind that is driving us to war. And whenever we can, we should sit down and look at ourselves and understand ourselves before we go into that room. Now, sometimes we don't have that opportunity. The situation that I was in kind of unfolded fairly rapidly. So I looked at it afterwards. I didn't know when I went to talk to her, when I went to ask her, why did this change? I didn't know that she was going to give me those answers that didn't make sense to this mind and that this was going to kind of escalate within me like it did. So I didn't look at it in advance, but I did look at it afterwards. So sometimes we have to look at things afterwards. It's just the way it is. When we're looking, we're always looking for what's happening here in me that's making me upset. It's pushing me to go to war, pushing me to control, pushing me to manipulate, right? Um, we have to ask ourselves, why am I bothered by this? Now, if I ask myself, why am I bothered by this? And the answer is something like, well, we agreed to a certain flight plan, and we agreed it was non-refundable, and she changed it without communicating it. That's not why I'm upset. That's the outer story. That's projection. That's blame. It is a fact that we agreed to a certain itinerary and we agreed that it was non-refundable. And it is a fact that she did not communicate with us about any change and that she now booked a different itinerary. Um, and it's a non-refundable. It's still under the non-refundable agreement. Um, but those facts are not why I'm upset. I'm upset because of something in here, some principle, some belief, some idea, and I need to find that. And when I find that, and I really look at that with inner wisdom, look at that with clarity, that will de-escalate within myself. Once it has de-escalated within myself, then if there is still a need to have the conversation, I can go and have the conversation. So let me read this to you again from after I've told that story and shared that illustration. Let me read to you what NTI Matthew chapter 18 verses 15 to 17 say again. Be careful in talking to your brother regarding a difference or disagreement. For in the world, these discussions must happen. When you go to your brother, go with me, right? Go centered, go with clarity. Check your heart, check within yourself to ensure you find forgiveness there. Forgiveness there is the feeling of the de-escalation, right? I am no longer angry and upset about this. I now know what was driving me to need things to be different. Check your heart to ensure you find forgiveness there, and also that you find trust that the situation has been given to me. And I would say this is one reason why I don't know if I will talk to the travel agent about this again or not, because now I'm just surrendered to the flights that we have. I mean, I have that trust that things are going the way they're supposed to go. I didn't have that trust before when I thought I had to make people happy and that they might not be happy with the way things are turning out. Check your heart to ensure you find forgiveness there and also that you find trust that the situation has been given to me. Clear your mind of judgments and desired outcomes. Ask only for healing and enlightenment. When you are sure all of this has been done, then talk to your brother while being careful to listen for me in love and confidence, checking within. In this way, there can be no loss, for the situation is no longer a situation of the world, but it is a situation of heaven, for heaven has been made its purpose. So the Tao is saying, let's go back to the Tao and look at chapter 31. The Tao is saying to the principled person, weapons are not admirable. I am not one who wants to walk into the conversation and throw little zingers at someone trying to hurt them. Like, now I see why your agency has a 3.2 rating. That is not something I value. Certainly, there are people who value that. There are people who value being able to go in there and really sting someone. But it's not something that I value. To the principled person, weapons are not admirable. Perhaps they are malevolent. I always have trouble with this word, malevolent, evil. To one who abides in the way, weapons do not have a rightful place. And I agree. I don't want to do that in my conversations with people, even though I slipped up recently. This is not common behavior for me, and it's not behavior that I value. A principled person values the left, peace. Those who use weapons value the right, violence, right? Take that sword and stab them. Weapons are threatening, and I'm sure that the travel agent felt threatened by my comment. To the principled person, they are the wrong tools. If you find yourself with no alternative but to use them, and remember, this was talking about real war. I don't know, we would really have to consider if we ever have to use weapons like nasty comments. I don't know that we ever need to use those weapons. But if you find yourself with no alternative but to use them, remain centered in the highest principles. And the highest principles were actually listed in chapter 30, right? Achieve results sorry. Achieve results without condescending pity. Achieve results without destruction. Achieve results without conceit or arrogance. Achieve results, but only those that are necessary. Achieve results without ambitious striving. So if you find yourself with no alternative but to use them, like I said, I don't know if we ever have to use those weapons, but let's say if you find yourself with no alternative but to go into these difficult conversations, remain centered in the highest principles, indifferent to ideas about fame or gain. Victory is not attractive. I don't want to walk away from this conversation. I showed her, now she's got to do this and this and this because I'm the one who showed her that she was not making sense. Right? This isn't the way I want to be. Remember, we talked about how important our way of being is in chapter 30. Our way of being is always returned. Victory is not attractive. Those who find victory attractive are happy to kill others. Those who are happy to kill others won't achieve their worldly ambitions. And this is a theme that we have seen, for a few chapters now, that these things that are not in alignment with the Tao can begin, but they will at some time falter out. They can't continue to be. They can't last because only the Tao is eternal, and only that which is aligned with the Tao can be long standing. Auspiciousness aligns itself with the left, which is a symbol of peace. Inauspiciousness aligns itself with the right, which is the symbol of violence. The reluctant military commander dwells with the left, the one who doesn't want to go to war. The enthusiastic military commander dwells with the right. One says, I'm going to go talk to her and I'm going to show her how wrong she is. Right? That's the violence. Speak of war as if you are speaking about a funeral. Under any circumstance, the killing of many is cause for grieving. Defeating others is like hosting a funeral. So I think the assignment for chapter 31 is pretty easy. First of all, we want to pay attention to ourselves and notice when we want to go to war, whether it's with a family member, a co-worker, a friend, a bank teller, a travel agent, somebody driving another car, just wanting to flip them off, right? We want to notice when we want to go to war, when we want to pull out those weapons. And then if we can, in advance, we want to set and look at ourselves, find out what's going on in here. What's driving me to go to war? Or what's driving me to try and control this situation? Get clarity about that. And then if there's still a need to have a conversation or still a need to do something, then go ahead from that calmer, more peaceful place. If we happen to just go to war, right? It happens, then look at it afterwards. We don't need to judge ourselves for these mistakes. That's interesting. We don't need to judge ourselves for these mistakes. We're not guilty because we made these mistakes, but we do want to learn from them. This is how we keep from making the same mistake over and over and over again. This is how we become wiser and more centered on a daily basis. So when we make these mistakes, then we want to go back and look and get clarity. And again, you will know when you've really gotten that clarity. Like I had the opportunity to have a reflection of that when these meetings were canceled and this other person called me and was very upset about the meetings being canceled. And there was nothing in me that joined her in the upset. And when a friend asked me if I was going to try and talk to that travel agent again, and nothing in me even knows the answer to that. So I could tell that this is complete for me. I can tell that the forgiveness has happened. The letting go has happened. So wait for that if you can before you go into the discussion. But again, don't judge yourself for mistakes. Just learn from them. So we're going to look at another chapter. Now, I mentioned that I translated mine a little different than some of the others, and you can probably pick up almost any copy of the Tao and see how they translated it. The one that I'm going to share with you is kind of in the middle. It's a little bit more like the way I translated it, and yet it still has a little bit leaning towards the more common way of translating it. So I thought that it was a good one to choose from. I can't tell you who did this because I don't know. The document that I have doesn't have any names for who might have done this, but I can tell you that a Chinese friend of mine sent it to me. She thought it was a very, very good translation. So let me share my screen. So this is chapter 31, and they had two different translations. So this one was called point 2. Military troops are not an auspicious tool. It is loathed by all. So ones who follow the Tao will not put themselves in this state to require the use of military force. I love that. We will not put ourselves in this state. In other words, we are looking at ourselves. We're having clarity in ourselves. We're not letting ourselves get all worked up without looking at ourselves, right? What the noble persons treasure or what the noble people value is in opposition to the ones who use the armed forces. One favors left, the other favors right. Because good deeds favors left, mischief favors right. The generals inclined to use force reside at left. The generals who incline to use the alternatives but reluctantly uses force reside at right. That's the part where they translated a little differently than me. From what I saw in the translation, the left always meant peace and the right always meant war. And here they seem to do that in the first use. They said one favors left, the other favors right, because good deeds favor left. That sounds like peace. Mischief favors right. But then in the second translation, they seem to have switched it. So I don't quite understand that, where they say the generals inclined to use force are left, and the generals inclined to use alternatives are right. So I'm not sure why it's not consistent. For me, left always meant peace, right always meant violence. But so that's the one place where they seem to be a little different than me. The generals inclined to use force reside at left. The generals who incline to use the alternatives but reluctantly use forces reside at right. This means these generals conduct wars as if they were performing funeral ceremonies. The killing of masses are regarded as sorrowful and tearful business. Winning the wars also is just like arranging the funerals. So that's you can tell that that's definitely a translation by people who their first language is Chinese, because the English there is not perfect, right? So it's nice to have a look at that one, even though I don't know who did it. So that's it for chapter 31. This is good stuff. So I hope that you are taking it to heart, and I'll see you when I come back for chapter 32.